don't know about you, but when I dream in story form. I think most people do. Stories are kind of the way our minds work, the way we learn things. Stories are a part of our culture. They're a part of the way we see reality. Which brings up an interesting concept. Jesus told stories to capture the attention of people, possibly. That's what a lot of people say. Jesus told these stories called parables. And people were on the edge of their seat trying to drink in this truth that he was telling in the form of parables. But I wonder if that's the only reason why Jesus told parables. In fact, I know it's not the only reason, because in Luke chapter 8, Jesus' disciples asked Jesus a very critical question. He had just told a parable, the parable of the sower. And they came to him afterwards and they said to Jesus, "What's that mean?" Well, we know from Matthew 13, a parallel account of this conversation with Jesus, that they not only asked him what the story meant, but they also asked him the question, why do you tell these stories? Why do you tell these truths in parable form? And Jesus' answer to that question was startling. Jesus basically said to them, the reason he told these stories was so that hearing the people would not hear, and seeing they would not see. Now that sounds a bit cryptic to us, but if you know the Old Testament, you'll know that Jesus is quoting from the book of Isaiah chapter 6. And in Isaiah chapter 6, Isaiah was told that he was to give this message to Israel, but they wouldn't listen. And in the meantime, their hearts would continue to be hardened, and over a process of 60 years of Isaiah's ministry, their hearts were hardened to his message, in such that his message almost became a judgment against them. Now I think what Jesus was saying was, the parables were told so that the people would hear the message, but they would not understand or receive the message because their hearts were hardened to it. And that's very strange. Why would Jesus want the people's hearts to be hardened against the message that he was giving them? Well, he tells the disciples part of the deal is that he is allowing them to be on the inner circle, to be on the front row seat, to understand the mysteries of the kingdom, he tells them, in Luke and in Mark and in Matthew chapter 13. Now, that's interesting, because that means that the disciples and those closest to Jesus, those followers of Christ, they got the inner circle on what the truths of the kingdom were, so that Jesus would actually later explain to them what the parable of the sower was all about. Now, we have to go to Paul to understand what's going on in the heart of God and the plan of God in all this. Because in Romans chapter 9 through 11, Paul tells us a little bit of why the Jewish people's hearts were hardened against the message of Jesus and the prophets all the way back to Moses. And the reason was, according to Paul, is that because of the hardening of the hearts of the Jewish people in the plan of God, that allowed the Gentile people, people like you and me, who aren't Jews by physical descent, to become a part of the branch of God's people. In other words, God has hardened the hearts of his people so that he could bring in us, who were not originally a part of his people. And so in hardening the Jewish people's hearts, we could be a part of the people of God. That's unbelievable. But Paul says, don't give up hope on the Jewish people, the physical Jewish people, because God's going to one day stir them up to jealousy, and they're also going to in turn to their king, Jesus. Now all this is a bit confusing, but a bit amazing. Because what this means is that the reason we are here is because God in his sovereign mercy has seen fit to even allow his people's hearts to be hardened so that we could be brought into the people of God. That's incredible. What a privilege. Like the disciples, we're on the inner circle. We get to understand the mysteries of the kingdom. So we should be overwhelmed and grateful at God's incredible redemptive plan. But also, it should stir our hearts up to pray for those whose hearts are hardened to the gospel, who are hardened to the truth of Jesus Christ, because seeing they don't see, and hearing they don't hear. So, let's continue to tell the ultimate story, the story of Jesus Christ, what he did on the cross and in the grave, as he rose from the grave, and he sits enthroned above all the kings of the world, because that's the story that will break the hardness of people's hearts. That's the ultimate story of all the universe. I think I'm going to go back and dream in story. Maybe I'll dream about the story of the gospel as I sleep.